What I notice with young people in general and then also young parents, it's lost faith within ourselves. We have so much self-doubt that we can't do better than someone else, so we put the responsibility elsewhere because for some reason we think it's gonna lead to more success than if we handle the issue ourselves. So you can see, maybe even stem that back to how we were raised in our school and the parenting styles that were very popular back in the 90s. But my husband and I love that you said it's not good enough and that shouldn't be okay, right? Like the
Mhm.
school system is not good enough and we shouldn't be settling because they do deserve
Mhm.
better than just like it's okay, it's good enough. We were trying to figure out school and still trying to figure out school for our oldest. He's 3.5, so we have some time, but we looked locally. There's no perfect option, and then we're like, well, everyone kept saying, "Well, nothing's gonna be perfect," and for
Mhm.
me, that's so frustrating because 'cause I'm like, "Sure, it's not gonna be perfect on paper, but it can be perfect for him and
Mhm.
what he needs for it to, like, to thrive,"
Mhm.
and it'll be like one school is too politically involved, and one school is maybe too religious for me, and one
Mhm.
school, has 0 technology, which I'd love to get into, especially with synthesis,
Mhm.
because now there's almost this opposing energy, which is all screens are bad,
Mhm.
all technology is bad. We're training the kids from a very early age to think that it's rotting their brain and they need to just be playing with wooden toys. And I don't think that
Mhm.
that's the answer either.
Mhm.
And I
Mhm.
would imagine that's probably the camp that you fall in.
Yep.
So do you get a lot of pushback with the synthesis model because it's like gamified learning and you obviously are embracing technology instead of pushing it away?
Yeah, so the first thing I want to say is like I think you're totally right. I mean, I agree with what you said. I don't think that there's one perfect approach. When people ask me like, "Oh, like what's that? What do you stand for? Like what is that? Is it innovation? Is it Montessori? Is it Reggio Emilia? Is it democratic schools? Is it like what is it?" I'm like, "Well, it's a little bit of everything." Right?
Mhm.
And it depends. I don't think that there's this one perfect thing. I think that you can find what works really well for your child, and that can change. You need to keep assessing and keep evaluating and keep reflecting, because in a few years it may not be the best environment for that kid and you may have to switch. The beauty of this whole thing is that I don't think that a lot of parents are scared. They understand that the traditional school system's not working, and they agree with a lot of the things that we're talking about, but they're like, I don't want to risk it, and that's fair. I don't judge that fear, because you're like, well, what if I mess it up? Well, they're not. I mean, if and again, let me make a small parenthesis, because the school system, the traditional school system, does work for a number of kids, right? But it's like a very small number of kids. I often talk about like my husband. He was perfect for the traditional school system. He fit in perfectly. That's his learning style. Like that's how he thrives. And so if that's your case, then wonderful. If your kid is happy and they're thriving and they come back from school and they're like, Mom, I learned about this and I learned about that, and you see that spark in their eyes and they don't lose that, then don't mess with that. Like, they're happy, they're learning, right? But if that's not the case, which happens to be for most of the kids, right, then you have to find alternatives. And so going back to what I was saying, I don't think that there's a perfect approach. I've embraced a lot of innovation and technology because I think that that's sort of where we're heading, and it's tied to this whole idea of screens. And like you said, a lot of people have put like the big X, but here's the thing: screens are here to stay, and actually they're only going to become a bigger part of our lives, and there's nothing we can do to stop that, right? Like that's just where we're heading. So given that that's the reality, then we have to embrace screens, and we need to figure out what's the best way to guide our kids, because kids need a lot of guidance in order to navigate this world, right?
Mhm.
And we need to be their allies. We cannot make screens the enemy or technology the enemy, because then remember that they're going to end up using it anyway. They're not always going to be under your guard, and if you don't teach them about how to properly use these things, and how to put the proper limits, and
Yep.
how to think about this, and how to develop that self-control, which a lot of adults, and I include myself in the fact, sometimes we don't even have. You don't know when to stop scrolling, and these are all things that you need to teach them and you need to model from them, and we ourselves have to learn. But if they don't have that, they're going to figure it out themselves, and I feel like that's a recipe for disaster, right? I feel like they definitely need a lot of guidance. And so making this world the enemy, or trying to like cover it with your hands, is not the right way to approach it, because it will eventually come out and they're going to be using screens. And so it is our job to help them since they're young. And of course there's ways to do this, and there are parameters, and there's certain ages. Like, I'm not exposing my kids to screens yet because he doesn't need to, right? And so the more I can delay them, the better. But then it will get to a point where it's like, all right, it's time to start, and we're going to do this together, and it's going to be all within a positive attitude, right? So that he can come to me for help, and I can help him with this. And so you need to take an interest in this for them, etc. And we can talk about that in a bit. But so when it comes again, I think that there's things that I love from democratic schools. There are things that I love from the Montessori approach. There are things that I love from all these innovative approaches. But then there are also things that I don't necessarily agree with. So for example, in the democratic schools, sometimes I feel like they push it too much on one side, where they give all the autonomy and responsibility to the kids 100%, and there's no space for the adult, kind of. And I think that that's when you start to go wrong. And these are not all democratic schools, right? But some just take it too much to the extreme, like Sudbury schools, which I love a lot of the things that they're doing. But then I think that there is a place for an adult, and for a guide and for a mentor. I don't
Right.
think that a 4-year-old knows what they want to do in life, or so things like that. Or for example, in with innovation and with technology and all this, I don't think it should be 100%. Like, some people are like, online learning, like, it sucks. How did you see what happened in the pandemic? Like, kids in front of screens all the time. First of all, that's not real online learning. That what happened during the pandemic is you just grabbed. We were all trying to figure out what was going on. So teachers and schools just grabbed what they were doing in the classroom and they put it online. And so obviously, if it wasn't working in the classroom, like, a kid's not going to pay attention online for hours if he wasn't paying attention already in person around other friends and
Right.
stuff. So again, people, I'm not judging, because schools and teachers were trying the best they could given the circumstances, but that's not real online learning. Real online learning is when you design something from the ground up with a digital audience in mind. You would never design something that requires kids to sit down for 8 hours in front of a screen. Like, that defeats the purpose. That's not online learning. The whole point of online learning is to be able to condense all the learning into maybe an hour a day, so that kids can have the rest of the day to engage in the real world and go play with their friends and do sports and engage in project-based learning and do whatever it is that kids want to do these days. Free play, get bored, whatever. And
Mhm.
so that's what I'm really optimistic about. That's why I think technology is so powerful, and that's why I'm sort of like rooting on that direction, because I feel like it's the way to restore childhood and give kids
Mhm.
back all that time that they're spending trapped in these environments that, like I said, go against everything we know about kids and how they develop. And so that's why I'm so optimistic about technology. What we're doing at Synthesis is, we originally started with the simulations that would teach kids the soft skills that they're not learning in school. So we talked a little bit about like how to figure things out. So we throw them into these simulations that are really complex and really challenging, because we understand that, unlike schools, kids do crave challenges and they want to be challenged, right? Like, that's why they love video games. If you think about video games, like, video game designers never say, oh, let me design a game that's really easy. Nobody would buy that game. No kid would play that game. They play the games that are, that they have to try so many times until they reach the level and it was hard, and then they accomplish it and the next level is harder. And that's what keeps them going. That's what motivates them to keep going. It's not that they're addicted to it. It's that that's part of what intrigues them, because kids love challenges. When they come with the appropriate feedback, when they know how to improve, when they're not penalized for failing, like, these are all things that I love about video games, because you're kind of reinforcing the things that kids need the most that they're not getting in school. And then obviously there are other negative things about it, but I'm focusing on sort of like the things that we can learn from them. And so at Synthesis, they have to figure out, we throw them into the simulations where they have to figure out how to play these games, how to collaborate with kids from all over the world, different ages. They need to know when to lead, when to sit back and listen. Things are super fast. So they're constantly like speed, like super fast, because they have to think on their feet. They need to make decisions. Then they need to sort of shoulder the consequences of their decisions. So they're really learning how to think. They're wrestling with choices and the consequences of their choices. They need to make trade-offs. So it's like they have stakes in the game, but the stakes are not so high that if they lose, they get penalized. If they lose, it's like, oh, okay, let's start again. Every 3 minutes, the game starts again. So it's like, it's not a big deal. So kids are learning that failure, it just teaches them what to do next. They learn from their mistakes so they don't repeat them. They are learning how to work in teams, and I mean, like, very different from teamwork in school, which it's very wishy-washy. The teachers pick the teams. There's one person that sort of like takes the lead and everyone else kind of sits down and relaxes, and it's a way to kind of like waste time. And so no, I mean, like, really how to work in teams, because if we know something about the world that the kids will inherit, is that regardless what they end up doing, even if you go solo and you know you do your own thing, you're going to have to work with other people.
Mhm.
And especially, you know, the companies that are like doing the most innovative things and really pushing civilization forward, they're doing so because they are aligned on a shared mission, and they have people that know how to work together in order to achieve this mission. So I think that teaching kids that, and they need plenty of practice with diverse groups of people from a young age, is very promising for whatever they want to do in the real world. So that it teaches them the communication skills that they need in order to thrive in this world that's constantly changing. And so that's one product that we have that we're constantly trying to improve and make better. And kids love it because it's very engaging, right? They're very in control of their learning, right? There's no adult telling them or managing their choices. No. And again, they have real stakes in the game. And so they love making all these decisions. Then the second product that we launched is to cover the hardcore academics, because we know that, of course, we need to expose kids to, you know, all the different sciences and engineering and technology and, you know, math and reading. But how do we do this in a way that is effective, right? I don't think the way we do it was effective. How do we do this in a way that, you know, kids can catch up and go at their own pace? We know that the best way to teach and learn is through one-on-one tutoring. Of course, this is not possible to do it in real life because we cannot get a one on one tutor for everyone around the world. But that's the holy grail of education technology, right? Like, how can we leverage technology so that everyone can have their one on one tutor? Well, that's what we're trying to do with the new product that we launched. It's called the Synthesis Tutor. And what it does is we started with math, and we found this phenomenal teacher, Dr. Tanton, James Tanton, who has a PhD from Princeton mathematics. He's written 26 different books in math. He's one of the ambassadors of Mathematics Association in America. So he's very knowledgeable in math. But more than that, he loves to teach, and he understands the art of teaching, because it's two different things. You can be a content expert, but if you don't know how to deliver that content or how to get the content out of the kids and how to sort of like navigate them in the right direction through questions so that they can get to their own answers, and how to give the right kind of feedback that, instead of scaring them from looking at what they got wrong, encourages them to kind of look at it and learn from that. Like, the stories that make it relatable, all these components are super important for you to be an effective teacher. And so we found him, and we've recorded him for so many hours. I think it's like over 200 hours, to the point where we've captured his essence, but in an AI tutor. So it's pretty incredible. You really feel like you're talking and learning from a human. Like, the kids call him Dr. Tanton, or depending on the voices that they choose. Like, and it teaches in a very effective way. It condenses the whole time that's spent in school, that's downtime, like in a few hours a day, so that the kids get out of the academics pretty quickly. But what's incredible is that, you know, when I was a teacher, it was very frustrating that I could not sit with, you know, Candace until you learned, you know, because you would come to me with sometimes things that you did not learn in second grade or first grade, and you had all these gaps in your knowledge, but I couldn't possibly sit with you and every single student until they grasped everything, right? I had to move on. I had curriculums to cover. I had 30 students. I couldn't stop the class because other students were going faster. So it was super frustrated because I knew that a lot of my students were not getting the content because they had previous things that they had not learned. But now with something like this, with the digital tutor, it's infinitely patient. It can stay with you until you've grasped, you know, those things that you didn't know before. And if you get it, then it just moves on to the next thing. And it does it in a way throwing you stories and throwing you examples and things that are relatable to you. And it throws you jokes. So it's really remarkable what we're building, because it's that human element that's essential for the teaching and learning. Like, kids need to feel, and adults, that there's a caring person on the other side that wants you to learn. And so I feel like we're really, and again, we're in the early stages, like the product still has a long way to go, but it's still so good already. Like, I'm surprised at how good it is at this early stages, and how effective it is. So again, I'm feeling very optimistic. I'm very excited because when I met Dr. Tanton, I was like, this is the math teacher that I would want for my son. And now not only my son, but kids all over the world can have access to this. So I'm very optimistic. The only issue, well, not the only issue, but one of the biggest issues we have right now is that it takes a lot of time to add content to the tutor, and so a lot of kids are just flying by it super quickly. And so we're aiming to have to cover every STEM subject first, and add all the lessons that we need to add and all that. It's going to take time, and so but people who are using the product love it, and we're just asking them to be patient so that we can continue adding content. But yeah, I'm just very excited, and I'm sure we're going to find a lot of obstacles in the way, but I feel like we are going in the right direction. We have the right mindset. Like, if it doesn't work, we'll pivot. If something else comes up, then we'll adapt. Which you don't see that attitude in the traditional school system. So that's why I decided to join this startup. And that's why I love it, because we're constantly exploring, and we're focusing on the things that we know are true about kids and how they learn.
No, I think it's beautiful.